Hey historians, it's Mrs. Tyler. We're doing Unit 4, Notes 2. This is Rise of Industry and Big Business. Our notes packet pages that we're completing today look just like this. This is pages 5 and 6 in the Unit 4 notes packet. By the 1860s, machines had taken over much of the work that was once done by hand. We talked about this way back in Unit 2. At the end of the unit, we were talking about the first industrial revolution. The idea of industrialization, which is work that had once been done by hand, done in what we called cottage industries in people's homes and cottages, moving and transferring into factories to be done by machines. So one example of those cottage industries was using like a spinning wheel to take wool or cotton to spin into threads. They could do this in their homes, but instead we start using machines like the spinning jenny. Okay, after the Civil War, new inventions and improved technologies brought growth to businesses. Many new inventions and manufacturing methods are going to change the future and impact how goods are going to be made. So we're going to review the vocabulary term called industrialization. That's the economic shift from making goods by hand to using machines and factories to manufacture products. Okay, one example of this industrialization is in how we make steel. In the United States and in England, inventors were working on improving the process to make steel. Steel is lighter weight, but it's stronger than iron. We talked about how the steel plow was a stronger plow, but it was lighter weight. It was one of the reasons why our settlers out in the West were able to tear up and plow the prairie soil, because in spite of the deep, tangled mess of roots that those tall prairie grasses had. The result is what we call the Bessemer process, named after Henry Bessemer, who was a British and businessman and inventor. He was able to come up with a process to produce steel more efficiently. So he's able to produce 500 times the amount of steel than we had been before. This process ushers in what we call the age of steel. Everything that we need to be built strong and tall or long is going to be made out of steel. Railroad tracks, building beams to help build skyscrapers, so we can go further up than just a few levels or floors. Wires, nails, and even needles are going to be made out of steel. The electric power industry grew during the late 1800s. Thomas Edison found the most ways to use electricity. He opened up a laboratory in New Jersey and hired many different assistants to work in research teams. His laboratory invented so many things that Edison received more than 1,000 U.S. patents for his inventions. His most famous invention was a practical electric lighting. He figured out how to make a safe light bulb that burned steadily to work in homes and businesses. He also invented the electric grid. The light bulb itself isn't going to be much good in people's homes unless they can actually have an electric grid that brings electric currents to their house so that they can plug things in and turn on a light. So the electric grid is going to safely deliver electric currents to buildings and homes. So in your notes, please fill in that Thomas Edison made the practical light bulb and turned electricity into an everyday source of power. That's on page 5. On page 6, we have a little more about Thomas Edison's invention. Please fill in that this invention is the electric power grid, not just the light bulb, but the electric power grid that allows those light bulbs and everything else that's invented that uses electricity to be safely used. So besides inventing the long-lasting electric light bulb, Thomas Edison's invention factory helped turn electricity into an everyday source of power for homes and businesses. Electric motors began replacing water wheels in factories. Electric streetcars were carrying passengers around cities. People can work longer and later hours because they can turn on a light and continue working. They can read later into the evening. So people begin reading a little more because they can actually do that once the lights go out, or once the sun goes down, they can turn on the lights. Communication is revolutionized. We talked about the telegraph being invented in 1835, and now again, 40 years later, it's going to be revolutionized once again by this man. This is Scottish immigrant Alexander Graham Bell. He was actually a teacher of deaf students. He was trying to invent basically the first hearing aids, but what he ends up doing is inventing the telephone. He was tinkering with the transmitter that was in his laboratory, and he accidentally spilled acid on himself one night. So he called into the transmitter for help from his assistant, Watson. Literally, his words were, "Come here, Watson, I need you." Watson was in another room. He had the receiving end of the little device that they were working on. Watson heard Bell's voice through the receiver and was able to go and help him deal with the whole acid spill, and thus the telephone was born. Now, a telephone has both parts, the receiver end and the transmitter end, so that you can both talk and hear. So you can see that sketch of Alexander Graham Bell using both a receiving end and a transmitting end of a telephone. So Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, making long-distance communication faster and easier. The telephone is invented by 1915. Alexander Graham Bell's inventions founded more than 9 million homes and businesses. All of these telephones made American industry more efficient and competitive by allowing factories, stores, and customers to communicate quickly and easily. And then families in homes can call each other. It also is going to provide jobs for women. Women become workers in the telephone company industry, working as switchboard operators. Originally, there was an operator. You didn't dial the number you wanted. There was no number. If you look at this, there's no way to dial anything. You just lifted up the receiver and you actually spoke to one of the telephone operators at a switchboard, and that operator would plug a wire from your phone line to the line of another person who you wanted to talk to. So you talked to the operator, and they would actually plug you in to talk to somebody else. Henry Ford utilized the assembly line to mass produce his Model T cars. Now, a lot of people, when they just assume Henry Ford invented the car. He did not. Okay, there were more than one inventors working on making vehicles and automobiles. Originally, automobiles in the late 1800s are something that's only affordable by people who are super wealthy. There were not very many of them. They were kind of complicated, and so they required a driver for back then. The wealthy people didn't drive themselves, and even today, a lot of wealthy people, if you're really, really wealthy, you rarely have to drive yourself. You might have a driver, but they would hire someone to drive the vehicle, and that driver would also be skilled in maintaining that car and keeping it running. Once Henry Ford comes on the scene, though, he uses the assembly line to mass produce his Model T cars. They all use the same parts, and they are made on an assembly line using a conveyor belt to move the part to the workers. The workers don't need to be as skilled anymore. The only thing that you need to do as a worker on his assembly line is know the one step that you're responsible for. So you don't have to know how the whole car is made. You only have to know how to do your one step. This means that you can pay the workers less because they don't require much training or skill. It provides more jobs. It provides a way to make more goods in less time, and so it lowers the cost of these cars. Henry Ford he's the one who makes the car affordable. Ford, get it? Right? Basically so that more and more Americans, you don't have to be wealthy to own a car. More and more Americans are able to afford them. By the 1920s, many, many Americans are able to purchase a vehicle. Most homes, once we start to see a development of a middle class, most people and families are able to at least have one vehicle. So, assembly line. It's a method of mass production that makes products faster and less expensive by moving parts to the workers. And Henry Ford is the guy who really takes this idea and runs with it. And he is able to churn out cars at a rapid rate. We'll talk more about that when we get to the Roaring '20s as well. So, not just the fact that Henry Ford invents this automobile, it's the affordability of that automobile that changes life for America. Henry Ford not only changed how we travel with his Model T, he also changed the way products were manufactured. He utilized the assembly line using a conveyor belt that moved the parts of the automobile to the workers, making production faster and cheaper. You can kind of see what's going on in that factory up in his brain there. All right. Brothers Orville and Wilbur Wright were bicycle mechanics, fascinated with the idea of building a flying machine. Okay. In 1903, the brothers took their gasoline-powered airplane to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, and on December 17th, Wilbur Wright made the first successful flight of a powered aircraft. By 1918, literally 15 years later, the U.S. Post Office is using air transportation to bring mail from one part of the country to the other. It's going to change the way that we transport goods and ultimately people. It's going to revolutionize our military as we talk about World War I and the use of air power and travel. So, Orville and Wilbur Wright successfully piloted the first flying machine in 1903, sparking industries based on air travel. In our notes on page 6, we're going to label air travel. After they successfully piloted the first flying machine in 1903, the Wright brothers sparked a worldwide interest in flying. By the late 1920s, the industry based on flying had developed. The U.S. Post Office is using planes to transport mail. The military is using planes. At first, during World War I, that's used for flying over enemy territories and scouting things out. And as we talk about the change of how we fight wars, which we will do later in this unit when we talk about World War I, the way that we fight, we start actually having air fights and fighting in airplanes. All right, in the late 1800s, there were very few government regulations or laws that told businesses how they could and could not operate. So this led to a growth of a few giant corporations that are going to dominate American industry. Monopolies began to form in the industry, such as steel, oil, and railroads. A company can become a monopoly by wiping out all the competing companies that make or sell the same product. Okay, they can set their prices higher because customers have no choice to buy from them. In class, we talked about cell phone companies. And if we only had one choice, let's say Verizon bought out all the other competing companies. They bought out Sprint, they bought out AT&T and T-Mobile and all these other, like the Cricket and all this other smaller industries. If they bought all those out and they were the only company available, then you would have to, the only way to get cell phone service would be through Verizon, and then they could set the prices at whatever they want. And those of us who are so addicted to our phones and feel like it's a necessity and not just a luxury, we would have no choice but to pay those prices. When Andrew Carnegie was 12, his family immigrated to the United States from Scotland. They were not very wealthy at all. They settled in Pennsylvania, and Andrew had to get his first job right away as a 12-year-old in a textile mill to help out his family. Carnegie learned about running a big business when he was working as an assistant to the railroad superintendent in his late teens and early 20s. When Carnegie got started, when he started his own steel company, he decided he was going to control every part of the process to make his product. He bought the iron ore mines. He bought the ships that took the iron ore from the mines to the factories. He bought railroad lines. He bought the mills that produced his steel. He eventually creates a monopoly in the steel industry. So the whole, there's the iron ore, he owns the iron ore, he owns the train lines, he owns the factories, and then he ultimately owns the finished product. If you wanted steel, you had to get it through Andrew Carnegie in the United States by the time he's set up his empire. Now, this is one of those rags to riches stories. He's an immigrant growing up in poverty. His parents had nothing. He had to work to help his family from a very young age, but he doesn't let that stay his reality. He's got this dream of building his own business, and he takes it beyond that and becomes one of the wealthiest men, not only in America, but in the world at the time. So Andrew Carnegie became leader of the steel industry by controlling every step in the steelmaking process. John D Rockefeller does the same thing. He's also got a rags to riches story. He grew up very poor in upstate New York. He learned to be really frugal with his money and didn't buy unnecessary things. When he's 23, he invested in his first oil refinery. At that time, it was 1862. It was the middle of the Civil War. We used oil to light homes and provide energy. Ultimately, that's going to be swapped out to the electric grid, but with the invention and the mass production of the automobile, we're going to use oil in so many more ways. He does the same thing that Rockefeller did. He took control of every step of the oil industry, the oil fields, the railroads, the refineries, the ships, the pipelines, everything to grow his business. He wipes out all any competitors. The only way you can get oil is through Andrew Carnegie's Standard Oil Company. We call this era the Gilded Age because we have a lot of these rags to riches stories. We have this extreme wealth and opulence, but at the same time, we have millions and millions of people living in poverty. So urbanization can be such a great thing. This is the growth of industries, creating factories and manufacturing, creating millions of jobs in urban cities. People flood into the cities so quickly that some of our cities can't even manage them. New technologies are building cities. Electricity and steel changed the structures of things. This is urbanization, the rapid growth of cities. There's positives and negatives to all of this industrialization, and I want to make sure that you get these things written down. We have more jobs, we attract more immigration, we have things made more quickly and cheaply, we've got a massive growth of wealth, but we also have overcrowding, we have tenements that are crowded. Tenements are